All right, so I'm going to try this again. I tried to do a video, but unfortunately my laptop turned out wasn't plugged in, so it crashed. But no big deal. I didn't even have any content really anyways. I was just getting started. So I did actually configure router 1, or at least I was in the middle of it. I'm not sure if I finished. No, I didn't finish. So I was configuring protocol ISIS, and I was adding the interfaces to it, so I can do a show display set pipe, oops, show, and it looks like I'm not sharing my screen. I'll do that. Sorry about that. Things are kind of, it's a lunchtime video, so things are just kind of by the bootstraps. All right, so now I can go back to configuring that. I do kind of want to set up a management network though, just because it's a good exercise, and it does allow me to use that management server, which is a little bit nicer to use. It is quite the diversion though, because I have to actually set up the keys and configure all that, and configure the static routes or whatever dynamic routing protocol I want to use. But one thing I can do is just use ISIS as my routing protocol, and then configure management into that, and then BGP later. But I think I'll just kind of keep it simple. And it looks like I got a phone message here, so not sure. Oh no. Yeah, I signed up for Kindle, and they're sending me notifications now, so I'm going to take a moment and see if I can disable that, because that's going to be really important, because as you saw, I was interrupted in the middle of this. So if that's going to continually happen, that's going to really limit my ability to be effective in life in general. So I want to try to disable that notification as soon as I possibly can. There probably is a better time than now to do that, but aha, I found it. All push notifications are off. There we go. And if you get nothing else from this video, there you go. That lesson will be the most invaluable lesson you can learn if you want to pass a major certification. And I usually have my phone off, but with things being so nuts with COVID-19 and stuff, there actually are some calls I'm expecting. All right, so let's see here. So show pipe display set relative. There we go. So one more interface to add in, and that's loopback 0. All right, so router A is done. I'm not going to worry about remote management for now. I just want to kind of get on with the show. But everything should be good there. Moving on to router B. And I've got a yogurt smoothie drink I made, so. Such a slob, sorry. Sorry about that. All right, so it's time for device B. Oh, and there's no descriptions on here, which makes configuration a lot more difficult, because you've got to constantly check. But the, yeah, I did 0 here and 1 there. So it's pretty intuitive what I decided to do, but I will go the extra mile and add the description. All right, and now I can enter in the configuration as they call for. So, yep. All right. Yeah, and as I said before, kind of part of what this video is intended to be, to some extent, not intentionally that, but part of what I'm hoping it will serve as in the future is cringe content, where I can look back and be like, oh, like, look at how far I've came, look at what I was doing then, and look at what I'm doing now and how much better it is. So any mistakes or anything are just kind of something I can look back on later and be happy that I have overcome. Oops, there we go. Oh, right. And the other thing I talked about, and this was before my computer crashed, was kind of diving in and reading more about this ISO address, because what makes ISIS special is it doesn't use IP addresses, it uses ISO addresses. And you can see, well, yeah, let me just demo this. So if I go back to the interfaces, so top edit int g000.0. Now, if I were to set a family, which I can set INET6, MPLS, I have this choice ISO in there. So you can see I can only choose one of these. So ISO is clearly not anything like IP addressing. It's an alternative to IP addressing. So you can use that for ISIS, but it has both INET and ISO on the ports. But you might be able to remove INET. So ISIS is obviously going to be a huge topic on this exam, but it's not the topic I'm studying now. But to get a head start, I think it is going to be good. So Juniper ISIS, let's just pull up the overview and maybe do a quick read of like the ISIS addresses. And of course, this was a topic on the IS and the IP, the precursors to this exam. So it is going to be very familiar to me. Right there, CLNP packets, that's very familiar. But of course, this being the most expert level exam, I will need to make sure that that stuff is well learned. So here we go. So here's about the address, the ISO network address. So I'm going to save that there and then come back to it later in the configuration after I finish this and read all about that before continuing on, just to make sure there's not a stone left unturned. Because as I said, and I'll bring it up again because it is something that's very important. And I'll try to keep a running list of these. So kind of the cornerstones, what this channel is all about, the things you'll hear me say over and over again, that I pretty strongly believe. I mean, you can, of course, like if anyone has an argument against any of these, I'd love to hear it, because I'm always interested in making sure that my beliefs are useful and to an extent accurate as well. So one of the beliefs I found really useful is concepts, not commands. So it doesn't matter if I've memorized a list of 100 commands, because when do I put it? Do I do show ARP on a link? If I can't ping from router A to router C, do I do a show ARP on the link between router B, between router A and router C? Does that make sense for me to do? So if I've got a topology where it's a PC connected to router A is connected to router B, and router B is connected to another PC, and all I know is show ARP the command, and I go and I do it on all three of those links, what was the purpose of even knowing that command if I don't know what I'm looking for, why I need to use it, what its value is? But on the flip side, if I know all of those things and I really understand the concept of address resolution protocol and how it maps IPs to MAC addresses, and how MAC addresses are only at layer 2 on the segment that falls within one IP subnet, and I know that, oh, it only makes sense for me to do a show ARP on the link between the actual PC and the router I'm connected to, and that's just to see if it has actually mapped to it, to the default gateway. Maybe it doesn't have a default gateway configured on the PC. You know, that's a very valid thing to check. If I know that concept and I know what ARP is, I can go on any device, no matter the vendor, and just question mark it up, read the help documents, and say, oh, this says MAC table. Oh, well, that's obviously going to be relating to ARP. This says address resolution. That might be relating to ARP too. So it doesn't have to be the command show ARP that I memorized. So this is kind of the first big cornerstone fundamental of this challenge. Concepts, not commands. You're really not going to get that far if all you do is memorize commands. You've got to know the concepts, because if you know the concepts, you know the commands, and you're not limited to having a command set be a specific way. You can question mark out, you can read some help documentation, and you can catch on to a system of commands that are not the ones that you have practiced with and are intimately familiar with, because you know what the commands are doing and you know why those things need to happen. So this is kind of the biggest one, but one thing I haven't been doing is keeping track of these. So if they ever come up again, I'll update this, and I'll keep it posted on my like about this channel on YouTube. All right, so coming into 12:30, so plenty of time to continue. So okay, so here's that local address, so that it gets the correct next hop through IBGP. And that won't be necessary for the eBGP connection, which is going to come up later. Okay, so now it's time to configure ISIS. And some people call it ISIS. To me, like that's kind of perfect, you know, example of this first kind of cornerstone of this channel. Concepts, not commands. It's like, yeah, it looks like it's ISIS. You know, you hear about ISIS in the news. Yeah, it's spelled the same way. You know, you might want to call it ISIS, but if you understand what it is, intermediate system to intermediate system, if you've watched videos explaining it, you would know that it's really not referred to as ISIS in the networking community, it's ISIS. So it's just kind of exposing yourself as somebody who is command first and doesn't understand the concepts and really has a lot of knowledge, you know, built a house out of straw that can easily be blown down. So that's why you'll hear me call it ISIS, because it stands for intermediate system to intermediate system. And it's, to me, important to always be reminding myself about the concepts behind the commands, never lose sight of that. All right, so it's time for device C. And before moving on, because that looks like a lot of configuration, so I entered in a ISIS ISO address twice without going and refreshing myself on exactly what it is. I mean, I know to some extent the first part is just kind of a mandatory thing that essentially says it's an ISIS address. And then we're going to have a area, just like we have an area for OSPF. Then we're going to have a unique identifier that kind of serves the same way as an IP address serves, because remember, these are ISO addresses, not IP addresses. So, but of course, they're going to be used in a similar way as an IP address, so they need to have a unique portion to identify the unique device. And then this last part, I really don't remember. So I'm going to take a moment here and read all about ISO network addresses. IS-IS uses ISO network addresses. Each address identifies a point of connection to the network, such as a router interface. This is called a Network Service Access Point, NSAP. ISIS supports multiple NSAP Network Service Access Point addresses on the loopback 0 interface. An end system can have multiple NSAP Network Service Access Point addresses, in which case the addresses differ only by the last byte, called the N selector. Each NSAP Network Service Access Point represents a service that is available at that node. In addition to having multiple services, a single node can belong to multiple areas. Each network entity has a special network address called a Network Entity Title, NET. Structurally, an NET, Network Entity Title, is identical to an NSAP Network Service Access Point address, but has an N selector of 00. Most end systems and intermediate systems have one NET, network, it's gone, network entry, network, I forgot. Network Entity Title, NET, Network Entity Title. Intermediate systems that participate in multiple areas can have multiple NETs, network entity titles. The following ISO, and I don't even know what ISO stands for, to be honest. Yeah, it didn't even tell you. Maybe it says at the beginning here. Okay. International Organization for Standardization, ISO. So the following international, wait. Wait. Why does ISO stand for International Organization for Standardization, IOS? All right. Well, welcome to networking, folks. I think that's why. That's exactly why. The following ISO addresses, which stands for International Organization for Standardization. I'm sorry, I just got to take a moment to laugh about that. It's an international organization for standardization whose job it is to standardize things and come up with names and stuff. And they call themselves ISO instead of iOS. I think it might be a mistake in the documentation. I can't let this go. This is ridiculous. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. This is like one of the funniest things I have heard about in a long time. It's an international organization for standardization, and the standard they chose for their own name is ISO instead of iOS. I mean, I guess iOS is the name for the Apple operating system and the Juniper organization, but couldn't they call it like Worldwide Organization for Standardization and call it the WOS or something, or the or like International Organization for Standardization? Like why do they need to like twist the acronym? So, and they're responding to COVID-19 somehow, even though they're just creating IT technical standards. Okay, well, moving on. And this is kind of an example of how there can be problems with, and this is why it's so important too, like the first principle, concepts, not commands. Like, it's more important for you to know that there's a international organization for standardization than it is to know what the name of that is. Like, yeah, like you like if you're going to email them, you need to know what it is, but the concept behind what they do and what they're about and the kinds of things they produce is way more important than what the particular agency calls themselves. It's not that important. They'll probably change their name next week. All right, so let's keep reading. The following International Organization for Standardization addresses illustrate the intermediate system to intermediate system address format. NETs, network entity, I don't remember. Network entity titles take different forms depending on your network requirement. NET, network entity title addresses, are hexadecimal and range from 8 octets to 20 octets in length. Generally, the format consists of an authority and format identifier, AFI. Authority and format identifier, AFI. A domain ID. So this 49 is the AFI, authority and something identifier, format identifier. Yeah, authority and format identifier. So 49. A domain ID. Yeah, I wasn't quite. Where's the domain ID? So generally, the format consists of an authority and format identifier, AFI, a domain ID, but I don't see where the domain ID is, an area ID, a system identifier, here's the system identifier, and a selector. The simplest form, okay, perfect. The simplest form omits the domain ID and is 10 octets long. For example, the NET network entity title address 49.000.1921.6800.1001.00 consists of the following parts. The AFI, which is authority and format identifier? Yeah, authority and format identifier. Oh, so authority is like who owns or something, I don't know. 0001 area ID, system identifier, and selector. And you notice that this looks a lot like an IP address, and this is kind of used for similar purposes. The system identifier must be unique within the network. For an IP-only network, we recommend using the IP address of an interface on the router. For configuring a loopback NET network entity title address with the IP Internet Protocol address is helpful when troubleshooting is required on the network. The first portion of the address is the area number, which is a variable number from 1 through 13 bytes. The first byte of an area number, 49, is the authority and format indicator, AFI. The next bytes are assigned to the domain area identifier, which can be from 0 through 12 bytes. So it can be 0 bytes, which means you can completely leave it out. But the first part, which is the AFI, authority and format indicator, has to be at least 1 byte. So you cannot leave that one out. In the examples above, the area identifier is 0001 and the domain identifier is 0. The next 6 bytes form the system identifier. The system identifier can be any 6 bytes that are unique throughout the entire domain. The system identifier commonly is the media access control MAC address, as in the first example, or the IP address expressed in binary coded decimal, BCD, as in the second example, which corresponds to an IP address. So what makes it binary coded decimal? Looks like we've got 18 here, but how do you know that the 0 goes there and doesn't go in the front there? Yeah, I'm not sure. The system identifier cannot be all zeros. All zeros is an illegal setting. The adjacency is not formed with this setting, and that makes sense because it's like, because they have to be unique. To help with ISIS debugging, the Junos operating system, Junos OS, supports dynamic mapping of ISO system, ISO International Organization of Standardization system identifiers to the hostname. Each system can be configured with a hostname, which allows the system identifier to hostname mapping to be carried in a dynamic hostname type, length, and value, TLV, tuple, in ISIS, intermediate system to intermediate system link state, PDUs, protocol data units. This enables intermediate systems in the routing domain to learn about the ISO, International Organization of Standardization, system identifier of a particular intermediate system. Okay, so a lot of information there. These are obviously quite complicated, but all you really need to know is that this whole thing is called a network entity title, and it's made up of multiple parts. The first part is the authority and format identifier, so the AFI, and that's typically 49. The second part is the domain ID, which can be left blank, which looks like it often is. Then there's the area ID, as there is in OSPF. And then the system identifier, which is going to be based on the MAC address or the IP address of that port. And then the N selector, which looks like it's sometimes just referred to as the selector. So kind of an interesting, yeah, so it's not telling you what each of those things do. I mean, I'm kind of interested. ISIS, RFC, and again, this is not the topic that I'm learning about right now. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I just am curious about, I'll just look at the N selector and leave it at that because I'm curious about what that is. So yeah, I'm going straight to the RFC. RFC, I think, is typically pretty good. So, here we go. So N stands for NSAP. I don't know what that means. Here we go, NSAP address. So a good Wikipedia article for that. And it's a 1 octet field which acts as a selector for the entity which is to receive the PDU. This may be a transport entity or the intermediate system network entity itself. It is the least significant last octet of the NPAI. So yeah, kind of getting into the weeds here. This is all stuff that is only relevant to a operating or a service provider environment to in a enterprise environment. ISIS isn't even on the exams. You'll only learn about EIGRP or OSPF. So yeah. So it looks like it's always going to be 0, so it's nice and easy. And let's continue with router C now that we've kind of looked at some of the concepts behind the commands we're entering. Because as I mentioned before, the channel is more about those, more about the concepts than the actual commands themselves. So, okay. And this is going to be going to D. Perfect. Oh, and it looks like I'm kind of a little bit low on time. We'll see how far I get, but unfortunately I might need to end the video a bit short before I can finish everything. I think so far it was pretty good content. We had a good laugh about the International Organization for Standardization being named ISO instead of iOS. We learned about NET, network entity title addresses in ISIS, we started the new topic and we configured router A and B. So now we're just working on router C. So we'll see how far I can make it on that before running out of time. Oops, and it looks like, yeah, this has three ports on it. Which is interesting because I wouldn't think, you still want to advertise this subnet out through, but if this were OSPF, that would be a passive command. Aha, and we can see, yep, sure enough, that's going to be passive in ISIS as well because that's to autonomous system. So that other autonomous system, router E, wouldn't want management connections. These are two completely different entities. All right, so edit, oops. And we can see this ISO International Organization for Standardization address always goes on the loopback. So here's the AFI, authority and format indicator. We're going to leave the domain blank. So now we just need the area ID. Then we need the, I forget what it was called. So we know this is going to be the end selector at the end. This one's going to be 00. But yeah, I forget what that was called. Well, maybe it'll tell us. No, just interface address. One thing, because I want to get more used to doing this because all the documentation is baked into the actual router. So instead of doing a Google search and figuring out what is the name of that fourth part of the address, because the third part is the area, because the second part is blank and that's the domain, I just want to use the tools that will be available to me on the test to look that up. So run, help, oops, and it looks like I can't do that unless I, so I'm gonna commit and probably end the video with that. Looks like I got about 1 more minute comfortably. So help apropos ISIS, or how about help? Yeah, perfect. So right here, help topic ISIS. And let's see, oops. This is going to be the NET. So I think we're going to need help topic interfaces and then family. Here we go. Yeah, and now ISO. Oh, actually, we're going to need. Well, is there any information on ISO? Okay, so is there like a pipe begin or something? Here we go. Let's configure. Shoot. Okay. Well, help topic. So help reference ISIS, and then or ISIS family. um, or help topic interface loopback. Um, yeah, so unfortunately, I'm going to end it here. I'll just look up what the name of that was. So ISIS-NET format, and we'll see what that is. Hopefully, really nice, quick, and easy. System ID. Okay, so it's called the system ID. I wish I could have gotten that. That's one thing I'm going to try to get more used to is using this help here instead of Google, because I'm going to have this available to me to do the test, but not Google. But all right, so I'm going to leave it for here. When I come back, I'm finished configuring this exercise, so stay tuned for more.